Well, why don't we get started? Welcome. This is the Do I Have to Prepare for a DC-less World? Let's get into it. First, I like to start all my talks with a quote. This one I think is pretty on point for the topic today. It just says, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to with the same weapons of reason which aren't today arm you against the present." Instead, just really think that's on point for today's topic. So let's begin with who am I? My name is Rodney Nissen. By day, I am a senior Atlassian engineer with Activision Blizzard. I've been working with the Atlassian toolset for about 8 years now. On top of that, I am also an Atlassian community leader and a certified Atlassian certified expert. However, that's probably not why we're all here today. You probably know me better by my alter ego, which is the Jira guy, where I give tips, tricks, and how-tos on how to get the most out of your Jira instance. Occasionally, I might fight crime. That may happen. So before we dive too deep into this, I do want to give some quick definitions so we're all understanding we're talking about the same thing here. Today's topic is specifically about the deployment models Atlassian uses, and they currently have three, kind of. We'll get into that. The first one is cloud, which is their most popular deployment model right now. This is the one where Atlassian hosts the instances for you. When most people think Jira these days, this is what they're thinking about. And it is the place to go to get the latest and greatest from Atlassian. However, they do have another deployment model called data center. You'll see it occasionally called DC. And the deployment model is what you use when you want to host your own instances. You don't want it up in the cloud, Atlassian managing for you. You want that control. Development does tend to lag behind cloud somewhat, and there are features in cloud that just cannot be brought over to data center, just the way it is. That being said, there is a third one here that I don't think it's kind of a gray area. It is the server deployment. It is the original deployment model. This is what Atlassian started with. It is also a self-hosted model. Data center allows you to run on multiple servers, whereas server is strictly single server application. The reason I put this in a gray area is it is currently being sunset. You cannot get a new server license, and full support for server edition will end February 2024, which does seem like a bit away, but it is coming very fast. So how did we get here where we're even talking about this? Well, back in April, Atlassian held its first live event since start of pandemic, Team 22. It was live. There was a number of people there in person, but most people, myself included, watched it virtually. And if you watch it virtually, there was no discussion about data center whatsoever. I watched all the keynotes. I browsed through all of the various breakout sessions, nothing. And when I talked to people who were actually there, they confirmed that no one was talking about data center. Well, to be fair here, Atlassian actually did talk about data center. The details were given to people who attended TAM Day. The TAM program, or Technical Account Manager program at Atlassian, is a special program where you get someone from Atlassian who is an advocate and helper on your instances to kind of guide you what's coming from Atlassian, give you best practices. It's a great program. I'd highly, highly endorse it. But that being said, one of the benefits you get is TAM Day at Team 22 or any team event. Unfortunately, this year, there was no virtual alternative for TAM Day. So if you were not able to go like I was, there's nothing there for you. And likewise, because it is for specific customers, not everyone who was at Team 22 was able to attend. And all this hiding the data center talk on TAM Day kind of reminded me of this passage from Hitchhiker's Guide, where they go, "The plans were on display." Author replies, "On display? I had to go down to the cellar to find them." "Well, that's the display department," they said, "with a flashlight." "Oh, well, the light's probably gone." "So had the stairs." "But look, you found the notice, didn't you?" "Yes," said Arthur, "I did. It was on display at the bottom of a locked filing cabinet stuck in a disused lavatory with a sign on the door saying, 'Beware of leopard.'" This is one of my favorite passages from the book, just because the lengths they went to not display this while saying they displayed it. And this is kind of the impression I got with data center here. Well, that bothered me a lot. A lot of organizations out there really rely on data center. They either cannot move to the cloud, or there's reasons they don't prefer not to move to the cloud. It doesn't matter. Their choice is data center. And there was no information for a majority of attendees on virtual platform for this. Again, people are making career decisions based on what they're seeing here. Do I get this certification and that? Do I take this job or that? What do I spend my time learning? Where do I study? These are decisions being made based off what information Atlassian is putting out. And in this case, no news is good news, is not always good news. Well, problem with it bothering me is I'm also a blogger. I have a platform, and by golly, I was going to use it. So about a week after Team 22 concluded, I wrote an article saying, Atlassian, we need to talk about data center. The thing being, Atlassian wasn't talking about data center. In this article, I said how I felt, that Atlassian's lack of news on data center was part of a larger effort to kind of hide data center behind cloud, so that cloud gets all the attention and all the new customers. I just called it like I saw it. And the thing that really bothered me is this effort and what they were doing looked very similar to how they treated server when data center came out. I was a big supporter of Atlassian when they announced server set, saying this is hard, this is not easy, this is going to be painful, but this is the right move for a long-term strategy. And well, fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, shame on me. I see a pattern, I'm going to call it out. Well, that began one of the most amazing, but also one of the most stressful weeks of my life. The community response was incredible. That article still has about 4 times more views than anything else I've ever written. Easy. And a lot of people came forward saying, you're saying the quiet part out loud. We've been thinking this, we've been talked about in private, but you put it out there. Well, Atlassian also took notice, and that was the stressful part. I depend on Atlassian for my career. I am very much partnered with them both in my day job and as the Jira guy. And this really kind of put a strain on that relationship, as you can imagine. But they did put together a response within a week. They didn't mention me by name, but some of their personnel specifically sought me out and made sure I saw this response. So I was fairly sure it was to me, even if it wasn't by name. And I read it thoroughly and I analyzed it. And well, I did not feel it was the most encouraging response. It was news, to Atlassian's credit, that we were finally talking about data center. But the way it was worded and the way it said is, look, don't expect too much from data center. Well, this started a good back and forth with me and Atlassian Community Atlassian. There was a whole bunch of other things that followed, a AMA, a whole bunch of other things. My team and I actually got to speak with the head of product for data center at Atlassian at one point, and we kind of got into, here's the plan for data center. Well, now we're going to get into why it's always dangerous to try and guess the future. The history is littered with companies that made a bad call when trying to guess the future and ended up not making it. Blockbuster disregarding both Redbox and Netflix. Microsoft completely writing off the iPhone as too expensive. IBM, they made mainframes for years, and they thought the world market was maybe 5 computers, which is laughable now that we all have one in our pocket. And the most hilarious one I think I found was Western Union. Western Union was and still is a telegraph company in the United States and around the world. And when the phone came out, they completely wrote it off as a toy. Now, communication-wise, telephone has completely supplanted telegraph, and itself has been supplanted by the internet. So, yeah, just an electrical toy. That being said, Danger is my middle name. I am going to try and predict the future now. The way I see it with Atlassian, everything I've seen from Atlassian, I still think there is a expiration date on data center. I still think in the short term, we'll have 5 to 7 years of good updates, everything before they announce anything. They will still have full support during that time, and but they're going to let the server fear die down, get everything settled with that before they try and do anything else. That being said, during that time, Atlassian has made it clear what their priorities are for data center. These are backend admin only updates that only impact the way admins work, security updates, and speed updates. And let me be clear, those are great. We need these updates in data center. The way our instances grow, the way security risks happen, we need these updates. But throwing in something for our users would also be nice on this list. And I've made my opinion on that very well cleared. But this is Atlassian's messaging. If you want the latest features for users, you need to be in cloud. That's where we're putting our money and our investment and our time in. If you need or want control over your data and processes, data center is our offering for you, but it is a trade-off. So there's the point. Do you have to prepare for a DC-less world? I think eventually, but it's not going to be an immediate thing. You don't have to worry about it happening tomorrow or anytime soon, best I could tell. That being said, I am not Atlassian. I am a customer, just like many of you are, partner in some cases, just like many of you are. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball that says exactly what's going to happen. And as I said, it's already dangerous to predict the future. It's not a proven thing. But that being said, even if this is a possibility, as admins, it's kind of our job to prepare for these kind of events. We run drills for disasters that may never happen, be that ransomware or a natural disaster or anything else. We have processes and plans in place in advance so that if these things do happen, we're ready to go. We know what to do. Things are good. This is just another event I foresee us preparing for. And even if this never happens, even if Atlassian supports data center for 15, 20 years down the road, the steps you could go through to prepare for a DC-less world actually are helpful in just maintaining your instance and keeping it clean and making sure it's performant. So what are the steps you take here? Well, I've had many requests over the years to talk about migration, and today's your lucky day because these are some of the first steps I would suggest people do when they're looking at a migration to cloud. The first thing I would say do is take stock of what you got. There are 3 questions that are critical when you're looking at anything within your instance when you're looking to clean up and figure out what you have. Question is, who is using this thing? How important is it? And is there anything I could get rid of? And these go for whether you're talking about apps or projects or even down to workflow and custom fields. We're going to talk about how you look at some of these different things in a moment, but anytime you're looking at it, these are the 3 questions you want to ask yourself and look at. And this is when you determine how relevant something is or whether you need to maybe consolidate or get rid of something or whatever your option ends up being. Well, first thing we're going to look at is apps. And the one question that I've always had a lot of difficulty in with apps is who is using an app? The way the Atlassian licensing works, everyone on an instance, whether they're using it or not, has to have a license for that app. So it's sometimes difficult to tell who is using a particular app or not. Well, there are actually 2 apps within the App Store that actually let you kind of suss this out and figure out who's using what. And yes, I fully realize the irony of telling you get more apps to figure out who's using your apps. But these can be temporary purchases. You don't have to have these in perpetuity. I find these are helpful. I own licenses to these myself on my personal instances, and I've used them for work before. So I fully endorse these, but I do see the irony there. That being said, the first one I want to talk about is by Adaptivist, and it's called Microscope. Um, Adaptivist actually let me know about this through their Assist program. We were a customer of that, or we are a customer of that, I should say. And one of their people, like, yeah, we use this to kind of gauge an instance when we first looking at it, which I thought was awesome. And what this does is actually go through work and audit different parts of your instance. And the one thing I found amazing is this workflow audit. What it'll do is it'll go through all your workflows on your instances and tell you where you have a validator, condition, or post function that belongs to a particular app. Here, it's actually one for my test instance. So we can actually see two places. I'm using a validator from miscellaneous workflow extensions from AppFire. And trying to do an audit for this by hand, looking at every transition, looking at the 3 fields for every transition, this would be a nightmare as far as scalability goes. But this app just gives it to me in one report right away. The second app I would recommend when you're trying to figure out who's using apps in your instance is Power Admin by AppFire. This one has what's called an app audit, which will tell you where your apps are hiding in different projects. So I could go and I could tell, okay, this app has fields in these projects or whatever in these projects. It is a great way. It gives you a different subset of information, but still tells you where your apps are being used. So for those two, absolutely invaluable. I love these apps for doing these kind of audits. Cannot recommend them enough. Confluence, though, you have a much easier question because in Confluence, you have a built-in tool. This is the macro usage tool under the admin section, and it tells you in simple terms how many pages are using each macro. Now, this isn't telling you so much who is using it, but it's telling you it is being used, so you can then go find those pages that are using those macros. The manual part is sometimes is not always clear what macro maps to what app. So sometimes you do have to do that work where, okay, I've got this macro, it's being used on 500 pages, just pulling a number out. This is where where does this come from? What app provides this? And that may take some work, disabling, re-enabling things on your instance, but it is definitely handy to have this built in. So after apps, the most impactful thing you do as far as cleanup, and the first thing you want to do is figure out who is using your instances, is look at your projects. Usually when I'm looking at a project, I'm trying to figure out what's being used. So I'll look up individual project and run 2 queries. One is all the issues ordered by created date, and the another one is by updated date. And this will tell me how much this app is being, or this project is being used. Usually I have a 6-month range. If I see that no one has done anything in this project in 6 months, that's when I start having some talks with some people. I figure out who's the project lead. Sometimes I get into Zap and realize the project lead is no longer with the company. Well, then I have to start figuring out who else was on their team, go to their old manager, figure out who's managing the project now. They might not even be aware the project exists, depending on how that transition went. And if nothing else there, I usually go for the last person who's still with the company that made a change to the project. They should know something about it, and if you cannot find a project lead, they at least can point you in the right direction. So this is how I find out what projects are being used and who is using them. When it does come to deletion time for these projects, and I cannot stress it enough, archive first. This minimizes the impact to performance the project has, but it gives you time where you could go, oops, let me fix that without having to do a complete restore from backup. If you archive it and it's 6 months past and you still don't hear anything about it, it's probably safe to delete at that time, if that is so your plan. I don't like deleting things in Jira. I like to think of it as a system of record, but it is an option. All right, so we looked at figuring out who is using schemes or projects and apps. Workflows and workflow schemes are actually pretty easy. Jira will tell you which workflows and workflow schemes are not being used by anyone. And these should be, if you're doing a cleanup or an audit or just taking stock, these should be prime targets to just get rid of because they're doing nothing but slowing your instance down. That being said, when you look at your workflows, you should also look, can any of these things be consolidated? How similar are these workflows? And not only what are the differences, but why are the differences? Understand you won't know why one was differentiated from another. And it may be just that there's minor differences because they didn't know the other workflow exists. And you could guide them on a scheme that would you could share between projects that consolidates these things so you have less workflows overall. This is going to take some work in auditing, you going through the workflows, seeing how similar they are, who's using them, but it does pay off dividends in the long run. Custom fields. Custom fields are a headache. We get this, we know this, but they are on your instance and they are stuff that is needed. One tool I like to use for custom fields is, again, the Power Admin by AppFire. They could search through your custom fields and tell you what projects they're used in. It's also easy to see which projects or what custom fields are not being used in any projects because it will tell you right there, this custom field has 0 projects associated with it. Again, easy target, something answering question 3, can I get rid of it? If it's not being used anywhere, it's probably a good target. But even with that, there's still some manual auditing that you may have to do. If a field is being used by a project, that doesn't really tell you how much is being used. And to do this, I like to use 2 competing custom or JQL queries. One custom field is empty, the other custom field is not empty. So we see here, I actually have an example where I ran this on an instance and we found that the empty is actually 29 versus 1 that actually had it filled out. Considering this was supposed to be a Jeopardy example, that's probably failure on my part because they all should have answers, but it was for a demonstration, so it didn't need to be completely filled out. But again, based on this, what you get back, you could start making those decisions. Just be aware, if you do this for the entire instance, you're going to get very skewed numbers. So you need to focus in on the projects that are the field is being used in. In this case, I actually focused in on these specific projects where I still got these numbers. So I know this is probably a good field that might need to go away. Sorry. Permission schemes. This is another one where Jira will tell you these are the inactive schemes that are not being used. The point I want to make here is this one is going to require regular maintenance and regular cleanup because every time you go to create a new project, Jira's default behavior is to go ahead and create a new scheme with that. So you're going to have to do the work when you're creating projects, make part of your SOP to go ahead and move that to one of your standard schemes and delete the scheme that was just created. I like to have a set menu of here are the schemes available when I have a project creation SOP. So people aren't trying to create something custom. They have a menu. They can say, I want option 3, which gives you this level of permissions between guest users and admins, and go on. This allows you to consolidate these permission schemes because this is one of the easiest things in Jira to actually consolidate. And you should absolutely take advantage of that because there are so many queries that go on when just figure out, does this person have access to do X? And if you make this permission scheme table smaller, that makes that query faster, which makes everything else in Jira faster. So you know who's using it, you've taken stock, you've got an idea of what can be getting rid of, what is being used, but it's maybe not as important, and what is absolutely vital. Clean up what you can. Everything you clean up now is something in the whatever future date where you might have to migrate, you don't have to move. Not only does this thing lessen your workload when you do have to move or migrate, removing unused and unimportant objects helps Jira run better. So you're getting twofold benefits from just a cleanup exercise. Honestly, this is an exercise I recommend we go through quarterly. And actually, there are scripts that help you with this. I found this amazing script runner repository by Gonchik on GitHub the other day, and it absolutely solved the problem we're having within our team. And it's just there ready for the world to be done. You will need script runner to run these scripts, but the work's already done for you. I've gone through, checked all these scripts. There's nothing nefarious going on in here. They're just simple groovy scripts you can use to help you clean up. So you've gone through, you've cleaned up, you know what's being used, you know what's important, you know what's not. How do you prepare for a future migration that may or may not happen? Well, same way you do for anything else Jira, you have to control how it grows. Your Jira instance will grow. You will add custom fields, you'll add projects, you'll add users. This is what you have, this is what you should do or should expect as you go forward. But something else you may want to consider is like when you're at a new app, consider how that may impact move to cloud. You can use your cloud migration assistant built into Jira since like version 8, I believe, that will let you look through and see what apps are good to migrate, what's not. If you have script runner, you're going to have a bad day, but there are some apps, automation for Jira that may be easier. It's always a balancing act. You have to balance what you need versus what will make problems in the future. The entirety of administrating Jira is the constant balancing act. This is just another one on that, but you really should consider it. Get feedback from your users. They will tell you what you need or what they need and what they want in the instance. So including them in this kind of process and letting them know if you have to say no because this is going to make a migration difficult, explain that to them in detail. Don't assume your users will understand. They're Jira users, and oftentimes they're just as savvy as you in some cases. So if you share your reasoning and get them involved in the process, they will absolutely help you out. So wrapping up here, Atlassian's messaging is clear. Data center is here to stay. My opinion, again, I'm not Atlassian, so my opinion is it's here to stay for now. There's no reason to be afraid of it going away in the immediate future. Atlassian has also made the priorities clear. You get admin quality of life, you get security, you get speed, but you don't necessarily get user features on data center. It is what it is. All these things are great. It'd be nice if we got all 4, but 3 out of 4 still ain't bad. That being said, even if you're saying steps that will help you migrate also help your instance. So going through these is not a bad idea. Your admin cycle should include regular cleanups and checkups. Make sure your instance is up to date, clean, ready, good to go. And don't let your instances grow out of control. Consider possible migrations in your change control process. That being said, we got a few minutes left. Can we get some questions? I do see one in chat already. Is there differences between SSO functionalities that Atlassian offers in data center and cloud? Yes, there is. Atlassian's cloud offering for SSO is called Atlassian Access. You will have to claim a domain saying whatever the JiraGuide.com is my domain before you could activate SSO on that instance. That being said, as far as capabilities, what IDPs, identity providers they could integrate with, both are pretty much wide open. If there's an identity provider that's following the standards, they could integrate with them, whether they're data center or cloud, without much hassle. Do we have any other questions?
No, Rodney, as of now, we don't have any other questions.
All right, well, I thank you all for coming out. I definitely hoped you learned something. If you're interested in learning more or want to talk to me, you could email me directly at contact@thejiraguide.com. You can visit the blog at the Jira Guide, or you can scan the QR code or go to Linktree to get my social media links, direct links to the blog, anything else you need. Thank you everyone for showing up.
Rodney, I think we have one question. Can you please go through the chat and answer it?
Yes, I do see that. Is OAuth protocol supported in cloud? I don't think it is per se. I do think OAuth 2 is, but I don't think OAuth 1 is. That being said, I haven't looked too much at OAuth in cloud, so I need to do some research on that one. I know SSO is fully supporting cloud. I've set that up on multiple instances. So SSO, you're good on. OAuth, that's a good question.
I guess, Rodney, we are done with the questions. No, I think so. And there are no more further questions. So thank you so much for your time, Rodney. It was a great session. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I love the back and forth and love the discussion.
Same
I
here.
hope to see everyone later.
Yes. Okay. Goodbye.